Hi everybody, and welcome to this 2-minute tying tutorial. The streamer pattern that I'm going to be tying today is a very traditional one known as the Black Ghost. I'm going to be tying this with a marabou wing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that whenever I get there. This is part of my 2-minute tying tutorial series, which does mean that though the video may not be exactly 2 minutes long, this pattern, once you master it, can be tied in approximately 2 minutes. I'm tying this on a size 10 curved nymph, a size 10 curved nymph hook. This is a really great hook because it just gives a great profile for this pattern. I've already got some 020 lead wire on there, and I'm just going to be wrapping my thread back and forth over this lead wire to really help with that transition. Whenever you're going from the back of the fly to the front, whenever you hit this point right where my thread is right now, you want to ensure that there's not a lot of lead wire first showing, but also you want to make sure it's a smooth transition, and it's very easy for the material to get over that. Next, I'm going to wrap back to above where the hook point would be. I'm sorry, where the barb would be. I might just grab a little yellow feather. This is something you would find on a piece of marabou, on the top of a piece of yellow marabou. I'm just going to pull some of these fibers away from the top, and I'm going to be tying those in as the tail. Let me zoom back in so you can see what's going on here. Okay. So you don't need a lot. You just need a few, around 5 or 6. After you have those trimmed, just style them up a hair, put them in place, and lock them in with a couple wraps. Once I have those locked in, I'm just going to leave my thread directly where it is, and next I'm going to tie in a piece of French oval tinsel. I'm going to make sure the tag end is tied into a spot where, if you look at it right here, there you can see it, I'll point it out, that tag end will go right up to that lead wire. Basically, I won't have to trim it first, and then second of all, whenever I am bringing my body over it, I don't have to worry about that transition. That'll be a nice smooth taper there. I'll get this lead wire pulled back a little bit. Then finally, I'm going to be using some embroidery floss for the body of this pattern. Embroidery floss is just a very simple material to use, but it really helps to build up the body, and it absorbs a nice amount of water. Again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to lock that in place. I'll show you where I locked it in right before the lead wire. So once I have those materials locked in place, I'm just going to trim back to make sure that they are all starting from the same point. Once they are, trim forward. I'm going to stop at those yellow fibers, get those butt ends out of the way. Now that I have all those locked in at the same point, I'm just going to bring my thread forward, go over everything a couple times just to make sure I have a smooth taper build up. Once I do, I'm going to bring my embroidery floss forward. I try not to wrap over itself, so I like to make each turn just once. And as I first come onto that lead wire, I just want to turn and take a good look at the entire fly to ensure none of that lead wire is showing through. As I get closer to the eye, it's definitely not as tapered up here, so I may have to go back a little bit and then bring it back forward. And the same thing, I'll just swing it around once, make sure I can't see that lead wire, and then I'll finish locking off this embroidery thread. After I have that tied under some locking wraps, I'm going to trim. I'll bring my thread back just a hair. Time to bring my tinsel ribbing forward. Oops, don't like that. Look like the end of it just got frayed a little bit. Try this again. Okay, after I have it tied up the whole way, I'll lock that in place, trim, and then I'm going to turn my fly upside down. So I'm basically looking at the bottom. I'm going to go back to that yellow feather that I had used before. I'm going to trim off about the same number, maybe a couple less of these yellow fibers. I'm going to be tying these in as the throat. I don't like very long throats, so I like to keep these shorter if possible. So I'm going to just line them up first with my right hand, switch over to my left, and then lock these in place. As I lock them in place, I'm going to be wrapping back towards the actual point of the hook. Take a look at it. Yep, that's exactly the length I want. So I can swing it back around, trim off the butt ends, come back to the top. Next, I'm going to be tying on my wing, which in this case is going to be a white marabou feather. I really like this marabou because it just really seems to move around in the water. Whenever I tie this on, I want to make sure that the tips do not go the whole way to my yellow tail. In fact, I want them somewhere between the end of the black and the end of the yellow tip. So somewhere right in between those two spots. That's where I want to make sure that they're locked in. So once I have those lined up, I'm just going to make a few wraps. And then when I trim, I want to try to trim as close to those wraps as possible, though this marabou just seems to go all over the place. Now at this point, if you notice, I don't like to crowd the eye of my hook, so what I'm going to do is stroke these fibers back and put some locking wraps in front. And then start to lock that white marabou in place. I really don't like that eye to be crowded at all. I like to be able to see everything going on up there, especially when I'm fishing. Okay, then to finalize this pattern, I might grab a few peacock fibers, and by few, I mean 3. Trim them to make sure their tips are all lined up. I'm going to place those over the top to represent the top of the minnow. Some guys will tie these in to represent the lateral lines. That is not why I do it. I really just like to have a distinct presence at the top of the fly. So I'm just going to tie these in the whole way from the front to the back. Make sure they're going straight back so they're right in the middle of that marabou. They are. After I have them locked in, again go back to their butts. Trim those. And then finally I can finish the head of my fly. I am using 8/0 black thread. If you're using 6/0, it may take you a little less time to finish off the head, but I like to make sure that I have a very smooth, tapered head and that there are no materials showing through it. Once I've done a decent job from the top, I'll look at the bottom, look the whole way around, route my thread back up to the eye, put in 1/2 hitch, and then finally whip finish. Pull everything tight, get rid of my thread, and then I go directly to some head cement on this pattern. Aside from making it look a little more classy and a little more traditional, I do want to make sure all these materials are secure. I like to keep the fibers pulled back. I don't want to get any of this head cement on those whenever I'm placing it on here. So we'll take a little more time. Okay. And once I have all that head cement the whole way around, I do have my finished black ghost streamer pattern. If you take a quick peek at it, you can see that you have the very prevalent white marabou wing, which really just moves around the bottle in the water. We have this peacock going straight off the top, which really helps to give a very defined body. Once these get wet, they will sleek down quite a bit and really help to give a nice bend to this pattern, which again is another reason why I like that curved nymph hook. It really just gives a nice little curvature to the body. We have our yellow tail that's just streaming off the back, and then we also have our yellow throat. Not a lot of fibers in there. Again, I really believe less is more whenever I'm tying in many materials, and especially the throat of that pattern. So this is the finished black ghost streamer. Thank you for watching this YouTube tying tutorial. This is part of my 2-minute tie of patterns. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them directly on this YouTube page, or you can email me at tcamisa@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody.